Thank you. And this person's question is about Christ consciousness.
Yeah.
How would you define Christ consciousness? What does Christ consciousness reflect to us?
Christ consciousness is typically a reflection of the entire collective consciousness of your world. In other words, you have your own individual consciousness, you have group consciousnesses, you have archetypal consciousnesses. Christ consciousness is the archetype of the collective of the entire population of the earth and the earth itself.
So what frequency would Christ consciousness represent?
Well, this is something that brackets both the physical and non-physical realities. So it is something that contains frequencies that, in a sense, are a spectrum just below 333,000 cycles per second and above 333,000 cycles per second, which is the barrier between physical and non-physical reality. So it actually straddles both.
Okay, that's nice. And I think this will probably be the last question. Recently, you described how embracing being spirit beings is an important part of preparation for the idea of open contact with high vibrational quasi-physical ETs. Can you give some examples of the aspects of and abilities associated with being a spirit which are important to learn and integrate as we raise our vibration?
The most important thing is to completely let go of the fear of death. To understand it, truly understand it, as nothing more than a continuation of life, a transition into a different state. In many ways, just a continuation of your experience of physical reality, because physical reality is simply another aspect of the spirit realm in which you exist and never leave. So when you really start to experience the idea of non-physical reality as a continuum and a continuation of physical reality, and start to experience physical reality as a projection of non-physical reality, that you never leave non-physical reality in order to have a physical experience. When you dissolve the idea of the difference and the borderline to a great degree between physical and non-physical reality and lose your fear of death, then you will experience yourself more as the higher mind, experience more abilities of spirit in physical terms. You will be a more balanced and blended being and experience more of what we talked about earlier in terms of the way we experience our reality.
I see. And thank you so much for your help with all of these questions. I know that in the future I will be prepared for that pop quiz when it comes my way. I'm sure a lot of people enjoyed that. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. We really appreciate it.
It is our passion and our pleasure. There will be more tests coming up.
I bet.
We thank you, and now encourage you to relax and enjoy your meditation experience.
Okay, and I've heard you speak about how physical reality is a mirror and how we sometimes hold on to beliefs that are not ours. Can you go into more detail about this? If physical reality is a mirror, how did beliefs not reflective of my core frequency come from others in my society? I'm trying to reconcile you get what you give, or what you put out is what you get back.
We have just explained this. The idea is that reflections, even though you're using that word, are not one-to-one reflections as in a literal mirror. The idea is to understand that you can attract someone into your life who may be completely vibrationally incompatible with what you prefer because you are willing to assist them. The reflection is they're giving you an opportunity to reflect your willingness to be of assistance in providing them other options other than the paths and the choices that they may be taking or making. So don't confuse the idea of the word reflection for the concept that someone coming into your life who doesn't operate or make choices the same way you do is actually representative of what you're doing. That's not often the case. They may simply be representative of your willingness to be of assistance to them to help them take another path. So reflection doesn't mean absolute one-to-one reflection.
So in a sense, would you say that when anything comes into our life or a person comes into our life and we get a certain reflection, the important thing is first to check in with your own belief systems about whether or not, if you're getting a negative reflection, whether or not the information being shared with you about you is really true,
Yes.
or if it's a projection of the other person's consciousness.
Yes.
And by doing this, it strengthens your understanding of who you are. And without those kinds of other reflections that I'm describing, you would not be as clear or pushed as far to
Yes.
express your truth.
Yes, the willingness to, at first, number one, see if what is being offered to you is something that can aid you, assist you, be applied to you, to improve you, to better you. And number two, if not, then the realization that it might be the other person's issue and they have come to you because they sense that you could possibly reflect to them what they need to change themselves, even though they may or may not choose that, is what gives you better discernment about what is yours and what is not yours. So the willingness to at first think about whether what they're offering you is yours or not helps you with the discernment to be able in the future to tell the difference between what is truly yours and what is an issue being projected by another person that has really nothing to do with you other than perhaps their ability to sense that you could be of assistance by listening to them and helping them make other choices other than the ones that they are choosing.
And in addition to that idea of when someone is offered something that's diminishing
Yes.
of their value or their worth, and then they are challenged at that moment whether to accept the idea that they're not worthy or to reject it because they know it's just can't be true. I mean, it's not, the inherent value of a person is there regardless of how they behave.
Yes.
And then once you have that level of clarity, it becomes easier to discern whether you're being gaslighted or something like that by another person.
Yes, this is why it is so important to understand the fundamentals, the very idea that you are worthy on the fact of your existence, deserving on the fact of your existence, because creation doesn't make mistakes. Therefore, if you exist, you are a valued part of existence. You are a worthy part of existence. Otherwise, you wouldn't exist if you weren't needed by existence to exist in order for existence to be all that it is. So when you have a clear understanding of the fundamentals of the basics of your worth, just by the fact that you exist, then everything else can be easier to discern because you start from a basis of indestructibility, of certainty, of confidence, of knowingness. And then all the rest is secondary.
And when individuals receive negative reflections from their immediate family or the people that are close to them, it seems to them it carries more power in some way because apparently that person's opinion of your value is more important. I mean, is there something you could say about that idea of just making a difference between the people who are close to you if they say things to you that upset you, or if it's a total stranger, how we react to that
All right.
in a balanced way?
Yes. But first and foremost, let us provide another level of clarity to the language that you're using, because we understand that the word reflection can be confusing, and this is why we're attempting to clarify the idea. Perhaps it would be better for people to understand, again, if they're willing to really look at themselves first, to understand that there is a difference between reflection and projection. So the idea is to learn the difference, to discern the difference between what is being reflected to you that you need to know about yourself and what is being projected to you from another that is more reflective of their issue rather than yours. So let's add the idea of projection to the concept of reflection, and that usage of those two words may make it easier to discern which is which. But the idea in family lines is because you have an innate feeling or an innate connection to them out of love, because family represents the idea of connections of love and support, that you add that connection, you add that idea of love and support, and it makes you take what they're saying more differently than you would with a stranger, where you assume no love is coming from them. So it is the actual connection of love that you have that makes you more susceptible to the idea of receiving whatever projections they may be projecting onto you that represent their issues, because you're willing to look at yourself more readily and assume more readily that they may be right about you, even if they're not, because of the connection you feel of love to them, because of the family connection.
And when it comes from a family member, then it kind of gives you an opportunity for different levels of processing. One is, are you having an emotionally reactive response to any diminishment that you've received from a family member?
Yes.
And on another level, maintaining that state of neutrality, which is a higher vibrational state, in order to ensure that the way that you respond to the person that is projecting in that way is a way that will be helpful to them or give them the opportunity to change without having it activated by strong emotions or revenge or getting back at them because they've hurt you, that kind of thing.
Yes. But the idea is that, to put it euphemistically, a pause is your friend. Silence is your friend as a response, because it gives you the time to consider why they may be saying what they're saying, instead of simply having an automatic reaction that has tapped into your sense of self-worth or lack thereof. So if you find that you're reacting, it would always be wise to pause and say nothing and give yourself an opportunity to mull over why they have said what they have said. And in the silence, you may find it easier to discern whether or not what they have said is something you do need to take to heart to improve yourselves, or at least a part of it is, or whether it is purely their issue. So the idea is to learn to pause when you feel yourself reacting to something. Don't immediately respond. Take a moment of silence and ask yourself, why is this person saying this to me? Why am I reacting the way I am reacting? Is there something I need to look at within myself because I'm reacting negatively to this? Because I'm reacting out of fear or worry or self-doubt? And then give yourself the opportunity to really learn to hone your discernment in the silence that you give yourself, to afford yourself the time to determine exactly what is going on, instead of immediately reacting, what you humans call a knee-jerk reaction.
And in terms of the balanced response to it, when you finally do respond, can you clarify a little bit more about the kinds of attitudes you would have towards the individual when you finally do re-engage in some way?
Well, again, it would be one of more compassion and curiosity for why they said what they said, and asking them, why are you feeling what you're feeling? What has brought this up in you? Can you give me an understanding more clearly of why you are saying what you are saying and where that's coming from? Because I want to be of assistance here. I want to learn who it is you are and why you're feeling what you're feeling, why you're saying what you're saying, because I love you and I wish to be of assistance in clarifying the communication between us. Now, whether or not you actually say all of that, that's the attitude, that's the energy, that's the state of being of compassion and curiosity that expresses itself as a desire to assist, to get to the bottom of why something has been said and what the real issue is. Because very often when people say things, it is a surface reaction, and that there is a deeper issue that really needs to be clarified and revealed and unveiled.
And the idea that if you discern that the energy that's being projected towards you is negative, how do we respond to understanding that while incorporating what you just said?
I just told you how.
So you recognize that it's negative.
Of course, because you have the reaction to it, or if you are neutral, you simply recognize it is vibrationally not compatible with the truth that you understand yourself to be. So you either have the negative reaction, the negative response, or you have the neutral recognition. And in that, you still maintain the silence for a moment, maybe even for a few heartbeats. Have the curiosity and compassion to say, all right, I hear what you're saying. I recognize that you have this feeling, but if you can, please explain to me where this feeling comes from, what you think is happening here, what it is you believe that has happened that is allowing you to react this way, to tell me what you have told me. So it is, again, whether it is actually said that way or not, the state of being that you need to come from in order to respond in a more positive way and a more constructive way, and to get at the bottom of the root of why someone may have said what they have said, why they have felt the way they have felt, why they have reacted the way they have reacted, because it's usually representative of a much deeper issue than the one that they're calling out.
Helpful. I think that's a nice in-depth exploration of reflections for sure. So thank you for that.
Yes, there is always some need within them that is not being met, and it may have nothing to do with what they're saying. You have to find out what is the basic need that is not being met in this individual that they would lash out or project in that way. It is usually, again, about issues of not being or feeling loved or not feeling worthy or deserving or something along that line. Fundamentally, that would cause an individual to project onto another what it is that they feel they are incapable of giving themselves, and resenting what another individual may remind them of in terms of their inability to not give that to themselves.
I'm sure if we all apply this, the people on Earth would get along a lot better.
Yes, they would.
um, you've talked about the value as individuals of remaining in the neutral point between the positive and the negative, as it allows all viewpoints to be valid. Can this be applied by the collective itself? If so, can you describe some aspects of what that would look like on Earth?
Well, it would be what I have described as the civilization on my world, that is operating on pure synchronism, is telepathically bonded in unconditional love, and experiences the idea of clarity every single moment while we are walking through a multidimensional dream. That is how you would experience it on Earth were you to evolve to that point.
And how does the idea of the collective consciousness work with the idea that we are constantly navigating to different vibrational versions of Earth? How is it possible for us to continually shift into different realities while simultaneously being part of a collective?
Because consciousness is everywhere. Remember that you're dealing, when you shift, not only with your own individual consciousness, with the collective consciousness of your world, but with the collective consciousness of all that is on different levels of expression. So the idea is that consciousness is everywhere. There is no place that consciousness is not. So you simply adapt a different form, a different expression of consciousness, and utilize connections to all levels of consciousness while you experience the shifting.
Okay, and can you expand on the idea of raising our frequency in relation to our sun? I understand that different versions of Earth have the same sun, and although Willa lives on a different version of Earth, that version still circles around the same sun as our version of Earth.
No, it does not. When you shift completely into a completely different universe. Completely different. It may look the same, but it's not the same. So no, when you shift, you are not orbiting the same star.
Okay.
Just as you
Um,
are on a different version of Earth, you are in a different version of the universe with different stars that, again, may look similar, but those are the stars of that universe.
okay. So this person is asking about the Anuhet.
Yes.
She says, once I had a clairvoyant interaction with a feminine entity, which I think is an Anuhet woman. I think she is that because of the way she was way ahead of Willa in terms of frequency and non-physicality, but still as human as one can get. It was the experience that made me understand that there is much more to reality. Is that entity in that role my most probable future life experience? And in what way were you and Willa connected to her on her paths?
It is a probable future life experience as you term these things linearly, because you are focusing on it and experiencing a connection to it. So it can be possibly a future self. Our connection, Willa, is representative of your Earth when the sixth hybrid race is fully forming. My connection as the third hybrid race is part of the union of all the hybrid races, so that when Earth becomes the sixth hybrid race, we all blend together to become the seventh.
Okay, and recently you shared a meditation technique for ringing the bell at Bell Rock, and I've meditated there in the past. Since I live at a distance, I'm curious if replicating the experience in my mind while meditating at home produces the same effect, or is it less effective than when it's done remotely?
It depends upon your understanding of time and space and your belief system. Since distance is an illusion, if you truly understand that, then your meditation at home can be just as effective as actually being in present with Bell Rock, because you would understand that at home and in present is no different if you understand that distance is an illusion.
So it's all dependent on your belief system
And your understanding of time and space.
and space. Okay, and this person's asking about the Mitchell Hedges skull. They were in a private session with the Mitchell Hedges skull, and they brought their clear crystal skull to absorb the energy of the Mitchell Hedges skull. How much information does one crystal skull absorb from another? And what kind of information can a crystal skull reflect back to you?
All the information that is absorbed and all the information that is reflected to any particular individual is all the information that is relevant for that individual's life path. It doesn't necessarily absorb all of the information in a master skull like the Mitchell Hedges skull, but it will absorb everything that is relevant for the individual connected to the skull that is doing the absorbing.
Okay, and can you give us a little guidance on making sense of our dreams? And the way this is expressed is, how can we make more sense of them even when they seem completely random and easy to discount?
Well, again, remember, there are different kinds of dreams. Sometimes if you're having an experience out of body, your physical mind will use whatever symbols make sense to it to represent or symbolize the experience you had, but there may not necessarily always be enough symbols or enough representative symbols to make complete sense out of what was going on a different level of reality. So sometimes the dream can be highly symbolic, and if you have an understanding of the symbols and how you relate to those symbols, sometimes even understanding that you are everything in the dream and what those symbols mean to you as different aspects of yourself being reflected back to you, and what they symbolize to you about different components of your consciousness, then you will have a clearer understanding of what the dream, quote unquote, means to you.
So I guess that can help when people do like dream journals, and they start keeping track of the different symbols that repeatedly show up in their dreams.
Yes, even if they don't repeatedly show up, you can still have a relationship to a symbol by meditating on what the symbol represents to you.
And that can be especially true when you wake up in the morning before you fully come out of the dream state.
Yes, it is easy to remember the dream if you stay with it and not just jump out of bed. Another way to look at it is if you have any proficiency with any other divination system, like tarot cards or such, you can start treating the dream symbols in the same way that you would treat the symbols on a tarot card or any other divination system.
That sounds interesting. Um, this question is, can you define observations, perspectives, opinions, and judgments?
Observations are neutral. Perspectives are your particular point of view that can still be neutral. Judgments, in the way that typically humans mean that, usually goes into some sort of adding your opinion, your belief, a perspective that may or may not be positive or negative into the mix of your observation. In other words, judgments and opinions represent the filtering of observations through your particular belief system, whether it's positive or negative, as to what it is you are observing, what your perspective of it is. Perspective can sometimes already be representative of a filtering through your belief system, which is why you have that perspective, although there are neutral perspectives as well. So basically, observations can be neutral. Perspectives can be neutral, but can be representative of filtering through a belief. Judgments and opinions are usually representative of filtering an observation through a belief system, whether positive, neutral, or negative.